What's up, guys and girls? I guess this is Lucas Grandsire, and you're watching episode 1 of the Lucas Grandsire Show. I know I really mixed things up with the name, probably threw you guys off guard, but if you're tuning in for episode 1, thanks so much for watching. 17 seconds in and you're still watching. That's pretty good. I'll take that. So yes, my first podcast. Thought for episode 1, I'm just gonna explain to you guys. I guess who I am. I guess my work in the industry, what I do, what I plan on doing with this podcast. What kind of stuff you can expect to hear, and hopefully, if you enjoy it, you'll enjoy the next couple episodes that come after it. So, for starters, my name is Lucas Grandsire. Hopefully, you already knew that. I've been covering MMA since December 2016. Before that, I was just your typical MMA fan. Started off as a casual. Eventually created a Twitter account just kind of dedicated to talking about MMA and, live tweeting The Ultimate Fighter, stuff like that. And then eventually stopped being casual, became a hardcore fan, and then, kind of made that switch over to media. I joined the website Cage Pages, made my start by doing a lot of these fans turned media. What they first start doing is they write these opinion articles that are kind of shitty. And I'm the example right here. Ultimate shitty articles, why I think it was like Khabib versus Tony Ferguson, why that's good for an interim title. And I used the same word like 17 times. And it was bad. It wasn't great. But, here I am today. Obviously, I wouldn't consider myself successful, but I'm much better than that. Hopefully, people agree. So I've worked for a lot of different outlets. Most recently I've been with Flow Combat, Sherdog. I've written a little bit for BJ Penn. I've written for Fansided. Made my start at Cage Pages, obviously a part of Fansided. I've written for a lot of different websites. That's kind of how I made my start. I wanted to be a writer, and eventually made the switch to broadcast last year when I started doing video interviews. So basically what I was doing with Flow Combat, I was doing, the written interviews, which it's a lot of work, man. Between you got to record the interview, you have to transcribe, and transcribing, if you haven't done it, yeah, good for you. Congratulations. Don't. It's awful. One of the worst parts of being media is just transcribing. A big reason why I switched over to video, it was just it's so time consuming, and at the end of the day, it wasn't worth it. Sherdog, I wrote up news, all that good stuff that you do when you want to break into media. So yeah, I've been with a lot of big websites, gotten paid a little bit, it's MMA media, nothing crazy, but I do have over 2 years of experience, so that's pretty good. Right now, the only kind of content I do, obviously we're starting with this podcast, so we're going to add that to the list. I'm going to look to start writing again, hopefully join a website. I reached out. Just kind of waiting to hear back, so start doing a little bit of written content again, try to do some good stuff. And then I currently host, if you haven't watched it, I recommend you do, obviously, the MMA World Show, which is basically this enormous YouTube channel, MMA World. We kind of, I contacted them, and then they started pitching me about some stuff we could do, and they were like, why don't you take your interviews and we make a show out of it? So every show I have about 2-3 guests, and it's been good so far. It's a huge platform, so it's definitely a cool experience, and it's a good opportunity for myself, for MMA World to get some exclusive content. It's great for fighters too. So it was a cool opportunity when it happened. But currently, that's sort of the main thing I focus on is doing the MMA World Show. But that's changing. We got the podcast. We have some articles and stuff. Things are changing. Things are happening. So, enough about me. Enough about my coverage. Kind of have to go over that credentials because there's a good chance you're watching this and thinking, who the fuck is this guy? Well, here I am. So, basically, my goal for this podcast is to, kind of go over all the topics in MMA. It's such a crazy sport. So much happening, so much news. So, what I want to do is try to every week just kind of sit down and talk about all the stuff that's going on in MMA, sort of go over all the news, go over, for example, all the fight announcements, all the big news as well. Go over some news from the smaller organizations. Like, when I say big news, I mean, we saw TJ Dillashaw test positive for EPO. It's obviously huge. Everyone's going to talk about it. So if I'm talking about news, I have to talk about it. But something that kind of flew under the radar, Ryan Bader signed a new exclusive deal with Bellator. It's not a huge deal, but it's notable. It's kind of a big deal, especially for Bellator and how much they're growing. So, go over stuff like that too. So kind of just, give my opinion on the news, go over the news, kind of do like a recap. Because I know it can be crazy to try to keep up with everything. Even me, obviously, when you're a part of the media, you have to be on top of all the news. You try to follow everyone on Twitter and everything. There's still shit that's flying under the radar. So I'm going to keep you guys up to date with that. We're going to, provide some coverage. Obviously, we have to do the UFC. You can't cover MMA and not talk about the UFC. But I'm also going to try to do post-event, I want to say breakdowns, but kind of do like a decompressing. Here's what we just watched. Here's what we just experienced. Kind of do a little bit of a recap. So I want to do that for, UFC events, Bellator events, PFL. I'm also a big fan of the Pro Fighters League. I like what they're doing. I like their product. I like the fighters that they're bringing in. So I definitely want to bring some coverage to them. And I don't see anybody else covering it, really. Aside from Jason Burgos over at Sure Dog. Shout out to him. I see him, providing a lot of content for them through interviews. But I feel like not enough people are, talking about it, giving you recaps and all that good stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to be giving some coverage to PFL. We're going to go over one championship a little bit. I'm not going to go anything crazy. One championship, there are some things that I don't like about it, including, when they just make up numbers. I mean, just, oh, we have 2 billion people tune in worldwide. And you're like, huh? There's no way. There's no way. Some hardcore fans didn't even tune into one championship. How do you have 2 billion? That's crazy. And obviously, people are calling them out for it and everything, but it's something I don't like. You know what I mean? It's sort of the way they're doing it. It's like, hey, look, we got 2 billion people tuning in, so why don't you tune in as well? If 2 billion will do it, you'll do it. So it's crazy that they're doing that. But anyways, not to get off track, but provide some coverage for one championship, a little bit for LFA, but just some background. Currently I'm in France. I'm here for college, and MMA is illegal here. So there's no local shows. There's no local fighters. A lot of people, they tell you, go out and cover your local events. I can't do that. There are no local events. My best bet is to go to a bar and wait till the fights break out and then, try and interview the winners and losers. So that's the best option I have, and it's a very shitty one. So as you can guess, watching events isn't easy either because, there's the time difference. People from the UK, they're always like, oh, I have to wake up, main cards start at 3 in the morning. Well, I'm an extra hour. So main cards for me start at 4 in the morning. So watching MMA live, covering MMA, it's even tougher. When the sport's illegal and when the time change is all fucked up like it is here. But, which brings me to my point that, sometimes LFA and stuff like that are going to be tough to cover. But we'll be on top of it. We'll go over the topics, go over all the news. I also plan to have journalists on here. I'm always interested in hearing their stories, hearing, what they do in the industry, how they got started. And I know there's some where we hear the stories all the time, but, that's why as the host, it's up to me to really, dig into that. We don't want to hear the typical stories. We want to, get into the meat, get in there. So, so we'll have journalists on. What I want to do is, if we have a journalist on, the first episode will be kind of like an introduction where, we kind of find out how they got into MMA, how they got into covering MMA, what kind of coverage they provide, and I guess advice and things we want to find out more about in the industry. So, my goal is to find out more about the journalist, and then from then on, next time they come on, we can start digging into these subjects, getting their opinions on various topics and doing that. So, big plans for the podcast, big plans that I want to deliver on. I don't just want to talk about it. I want to do it. So I'm excited for the potential that this podcast has, and hopefully we can deliver a quality product and get into some stuff. Alright, so we obviously have plenty of time, so we'll do a quick recap of UFC 236, talk about some of the news that went down, some of the fights that got announced. But before we go any further, just wanted to update on the MMA World Show. If you've watched it, great. If you haven't, fix that. It's MMA World on YouTube. Or you can find me on Twitter at Grandsire MMA, and in the link in my bio, I have a playlist. I have all the episodes. So there's some good guests. What happens is we record the interviews ahead of time, and then we kind of figure out what lineups would be best, and we combine them. So right now we're running a little bit behind. It's not my fault. I'm not the one who decides when the episodes go out. But next episode that drops, we have it's going to be Curtis Blades and Dominic Reyes. Two big names. And, it's a pretty cool interview. Dominic Reyes, he's up in the mountains, which, I asked him if there are any dangerous animals, and he confirms that there are, not including himself, of course. So it's a good interview. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but I'm not going to tell you shit either, because then you won't watch it. Curtis Blades is fired up, man. I've interviewed him plenty of times, and you know how Curtis Blades is. You ask him, like, what'd you think of the fight? It was a good fight, a good performance. But not this time. This time it's fired up, talking trash about Justin Willis. Gave a recap of the fight, explained a lot of things, gave his opinion on Greg Hardy getting a co-main event. So it's a pretty good episode, if I do say so myself, and hopefully it should be dropping this week. But that's one episode. For the next guest, I don't know what the lineup is for these next couple of episodes, but I talked to Ricardo Lamas. The interview turned out really good. He started the interview. It was kind of your typical, you come up with a question, he kind of just gives you the answer, so you move on to the next question. But I was able to get him to open up about, his Cuban heritage, talk a little bit about his father and stuff like that. So it was super interesting, not just MMA related, but, just talking about Cuba and stuff like that. I learned a lot from the interview. So it's a good one. Hopefully it'll be dropping sooner rather than later. Devin Clark on the show as well. He talked about, obviously fighting in Russia, his fight, all that good stuff. Talked about his work with kids with Down syndrome. Like I told him in the interview, I'm going to talk to him about that work with Down syndrome every time. It's such a positive thing. We have so many negatives going on in the MMA world, between PDs and low pay, which we'll all get to later, and stuff like that. But I thought, what, if I'm going to have Devin Clark, and he's doing something that's so good, so positive, we're going to talk to him about it, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't mind that either. So, Devin Clark to talk about that. We had Alex Nicholson, talking about PFL. I'm not going to lie to you, he threw me off guard because while we're doing the interview, there's I guess one of his training partners, he's holding up a dog, and he was like, oh, we have a special guest. So, you have to be excited, right? Special guests are like, oh, cool, a dog. And he was like, no. Moves the camera. It's Mike Perry. It caught me off guard. That reaction, oh shit, that's genuine. Otherwise, I would have been, oh, great. Thank you for joining me. I am a professional. But nah, he caught me off guard. I'm not gonna lie to you. I screamed out, oh shit, and Mike Perry's around for the whole interview. So that was pretty cool. You go in there to interview Alex. Mike Perry appears. Always got to enjoy that. Always got to appreciate that. So that's 3 interviews. There are more. There are more interviews coming as well. More people that I've talked to. So like I said, I try to give everybody a platform. Bellator, PFL, all that stuff. But you'd be surprised, man. Not all Bellator fighters are easy to book. I'm always surprised. Other media members, they'll tell you oh, talk to the Bellator guys. They want more coverage and stuff. But then you reach out to them and it's like, I'll see if I can do an interview, but I don't know. So it's like, all right, well, you're obviously not desperate for coverage, but I'm doing what I can. I don't want to be that guy that's, the MMA World Show. The whole point is that it's MMA. It's not, UFC World Show. So I'm trying to bring a different guest. So some exciting interviews coming to it. The next show is going to be good as well and everything. So, just kind of keep it coming. But that was the update on the MMA World Show. Now, the Lucas Grandsire Show. We're going to get into some of this news. So, currently, it is Monday, April 15th. One of the things that dropped today was the disclosed salaries for UFC 236 that just went by. I know every time these salaries come out, everybody's always like, oh, they're underpaid, blah, blah. But if you if you look at these salaries, they are criminally underpaid. I mean, it's the fights we got, and to be paid that amount, it's obviously you don't want to criticize, but it's like, damn, like they deserve so much more than what we saw. But all right, let's read it out. We have just main and co-main, just that alone. And these numbers all come from MMA Fighting. Got to properly source. So Dustin Poirier, and that's how you pronounce his last name. I've heard Poirier, all that good stuff. I heard him in an interview. He said Dustin Poirier. So there you go. That's how you pronounce it. Don't come after me. Salary. So Dustin Poirier got paid $250,000, and that's total, bonuses and everything. Okay, Max Holloway $350,000. Israel Adesanya same thing, $350,000. Kelvin Gastelum $150,000. After the fight, I was seeing people talking about how all these fighters deserved over $1 million, and if it was anything less than $1 million, it was they're criminally underpaid, and they don't deserve anything less than a couple of commas. And I'll tell you what, man, there's one comma in there, and none of them got even close to $500,000. To say I was surprised in an understatement. Article comes out from MMA Fighting, and they're like, Max Holloway, Israel Adesanya, they close out the highest salaries with $350,000. I thought, what? These guys, they gave us great fights. They were title fights as well. It's obviously, if you're a regular person with a regular lifestyle and you make that kind of money, like if you wanted to not work for a year or two, you probably could, and you'd live pretty comfortably. But for professional athletes, people that are out here on TV fighting each other, punching each other in the face and stuff, that's low. It's not good at all. So the media reaction is just, it's a shame. You have Alan Joban talking about how that ESPN money was going to trickle down to fighters. Come on, Alan. That is not how it works. All these fighters were excited about ESPN. Some of that money is going to trickle down to us. You guys don't have a fighters union, so you can't negotiate that kind of stuff, which means it's not going to happen. You can't just, what's that book from Family Guy? Wish it, want it, believe it, or something. That's not how it works. It's low. It's surprisingly low, especially when you consider, after the fight, people were saying Israel's a star. Israel's going to get paid so much. And not just Israel. All of them deserved a higher pay than that. Kelvin Gastelum, I was a little bit surprised by that number. I thought for sure he'd be closer to at least $250,000. So him being paid so much less than everybody else, it was crazy. Especially when you consider that he's with Dominance MMA, and the big thing about Dominance is, they're getting paid so much, best paid guys in the business. So to tell you I was surprised when I saw those numbers, well, I'd be lying. I was surprised when I saw those numbers. It just doesn't make any sense. So obviously they're criminally underpaid. You don't need me to tell you that. You already have everybody telling you that on Twitter. But it's crazy that the salaries come out, and it's like, the thing is, they don't get paid on how great the fight was. Obviously if they were getting paid, it'd all be clear in $5 million easy. But they have their contracts. Some of them have bonuses, others don't. And the crazy thing is, there was a little bit of extra money in there from those bonuses, the $50K. So when you put that in perspective, it's crazy that they're not getting paid more. And it's up to the fighters at the end of the day. As media, we can keep harping on it, we can keep bugging people, but until the fighters decide they're going to do something about it, and the managers too, they're the ones negotiating. We can't do anything about it. So it's disappointing to see those numbers, especially because for me it leaves a sour taste in my mouth. We got to watch those fights, and they were so good. We enjoyed the fights so much. There's such great fights, and these guys, you saw those pictures the next day. I mean, they look like they got ran over by trucks. I mean, they put everything out there. And to have this kind of pay, you're like, like I put on Twitter, in that GIF, those are rookie numbers. We got to get those numbers up. I mean, that's disappointing. But it's something that we have to talk about. We can't act satisfied with it. These guys deserve to get paid more. They're with ESPN now, where there's going to be more money. and they deserve to get paid more. So we have to put that out there, and hopefully something changes. Someone takes a stand, and we'll see what happens. Moving on, UFC 236. Obviously, what an event, right? A lot of people were criticizing the card, saying it was top heavy. I agree in a sense, but I don't know. Maybe I've been following MMA for such a long time that I get excited over names that maybe people wouldn't. Khalil Roundtree versus Eric Anders. I was super excited for that fight. I was like, Eric likes to bang. We know Khalil likes to bang. He likes to knock people out. So I looked at it. I was like, this is a great fight. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't think it was going to be that one-sided. We'll get to that. So I thought that fight was going to be great. Jalen Turner was returning. I was excited for that one. I thought it was going to be a great fight. I was expecting more out of him. I was a little bit disappointed he wasn't able to grab the victory. Obviously, his team Rolla Frivola. He's a good fighter and not someone to be taken lightly, but disappointed nonetheless. But yeah, let's talk about, some of these results. Someone on the card who won, and then no one really, I don't know, I guess nobody really thought about it too much, was someone on the main card, Mr. Dwight Grant, defeating Alan Jouban. This is a guy who, before you know it, he's going to be up there fighting some of these more legit welterweights. I mean, obviously he doesn't have a Wikipedia page yet, but, he's beaten Alan Jouban. He had that huge knockout in his last fight. I'm excited to see what's next for him. He's on a bit of a streak. If I'm not mistaken, comes from the Contender Series. So this is a guy with, the body snatcher. If he can continue his rise, continue to beat these guys, he's in for something exciting. I mean, obviously he lost a fight to Zach Otto before the Carlo fight. But before, beating Alan Jouban, it kind of puts that in the rearview mirror. Now he's on a 2-fight winning streak. One of them is a huge finish. We know that he's got that knockout power. So I'm excited to see where he goes with that, because you know what? He's proven that he's a legit guy, and he's got a lot of good things in the works. So it's gonna be interesting to see what he does with that. Nikita Krylov beating Ovince St. Pro. I mean, what do you want to say about that? Ovince, what are you doing? This is a guy who goes 5 rounds with John Jones despite having a broken arm. Knocks out Corey Anderson with a crazy head kick. I mean, he's, knocking out Shogun, who, skateboard or not, he's beating. He has the ability to beat anyone at 6'4", athletic. He's a behemoth. And then he goes out there and loses 2 in a row. Krylov, obviously, he's no slouch, but come on, that, Ovince already beat him the first time. Krylov had lost to Blachowicz beforehand. I mean, I definitely thought could have done better than that. Let's not get crazy. Krylov isn't necessarily fighting anyone, that's at that high level. So, disappointing nonetheless. But that's the fight game. OSP. It's such a thin division that you hope for guys like OSP, who's a true light heavyweight. 6'4", and he's huge, muscular. He looks like a light heavyweight. He looks like a scary guy. So you want to see some of that talent in the division, and it's disappointing when they're not able to deliver. Yeah, man, we saw some good victory. Poliana Botelho obviously beating Lauren Mueller. Mueller not looking like what we thought, before the UFC. Randy Costa, unfortunately, losing his debut. It's disappointing, but Brandon Davis, is a legit guy. Bilal Muhammad beating Curtis Millender, loses the first round and then comes back before getting a 10-8 round. Bilal Muhammad, man, this is a guy who, loses to Jeff Neal. Now he ends up on the prelims, and we're not sure what's next for Bilal. Bilal's record is 15-3. He only has 3 losses. Those 3 losses are to 3 legit guys, and Alan Jouban, Vicente Luque, and Jeff Neal. So this is obviously a guy who, if he's going to lose, he's only going to lose to talented guys. So I'm happy to see him do well. Curtis Millender, in the same breath you say that you're disappointed in OSP and stuff like that, you have to be disappointed in Curtis. People were saying before the fight, Bilal was going to win by using his wrestling because Curtis kind of got exposed. And unfortunately for Curtis, that's exactly what happened. Bilal used his wrestling, and it's a good victory for Bilal because I feel like people are kind of quick to write him off and not realize the level that he's at. He's obviously at a very big. He's obviously a talented guy. I'd say gatekeeper, but like in a good way. Like if you beat Bilal, like you're a legit talent who's gonna go on to the top 10. So. And who knows? Bilal Muhammad can always string together some wins, and before you know it, he's in the top 10 himself. So it's a good win for Bilal. Curtis, I'm not gonna hold it against him too much because obviously it was a very quick comeback, and despite knowing that he has to work on his wrestling, he didn't have the time. That there wasn't enough time for him to come back with his wrestling. So I feel like, he mentioned that he's gonna spend the entire summer grappling tournaments, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, everything. So hopefully that wasn't just kind of one of those things that you tell the media to get people excited. So if he really does that, that's going to be great. I think that's the best thing for him, especially for an athlete, guys who are competitive and like to compete. I think doing competition like grappling tournaments, it's going to force you to be good because, you want to do well in these tournaments. And that's going to be that extra motivation that, is going to help him reach that next level. Like we know his stand-up's legit. He's out there knocking out guys like Thiago Alves. We know his stand-up is legit. Beat Max Griffin, who we're going to get to later. So, Curtis can get that ground game. I'm not going to count him out. He's going to learn from these losses. Both two very legit guys. So, I'm excited to see if he does spend the entire summer grappling and everything. I'm excited to see his growth because he's still a young guy. And we're going to see what's next for him. Montel Jackson. This is a guy we need to start watching out for, man. He's got there through the Contender Series, watched his fight against Brian Kelleher and everything, and he's coming. Andre Sukumta, it's a legit win. One of those guys that if you can get past, you're definitely in the conversation of guys to watch out for. And Montel Jackson, if you watch his interviews, this guy is no nonsense. You know what I mean? I saw an interview with Mike Heck, and Mike would try to shoot some jokes at him and stuff, and Montel was just so serious, so focused in. So this is a guy, it's going to be interesting to see what he does. He's a tall guy too, especially for this division. I don't know how tall he is off the top of my head, but Andre Sukumtat's 5'9", and he's taller than Andre Sukumtat. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes in this division. One last guy I want to talk about before we move on to the Khalil Roundtree and then the rest of those fights is Max Griffin. I talked to Max Griffin for the fight. Unfortunately, that interview wasn't able to make it to the show. Just had some logistics issues, getting everything posted. But there was some beef there in that fight. I tell you what, these guys had trained together. I don't want to say the wrong name, but I forgot what the gym was called. But I want to say it was Extreme Couture. And they trained together. And basically, this is a guy who, not Max Griffin, of course, his opponent, Zelim. I don't even want to mispronounce it, but they were, when it comes to sparring, he was trying to hurt guys and, eventually got kicked out of the gym. Max was explaining it where, the sparring starts and it's kind of just like touch sparring. And then before you know it, you got two gorillas going at it. So, there was beef there. Apparently, they told Brett Okamoto that they were supposed to fight. He tried to fight him in the hotel and stuff. So it's crazy that that this beef kind of went under the radar. Something I didn't know about until I talked to Max. So him grabbing the victory, obviously, he had that extra motivation. On top of the fact that he had fought Thiago Alves and kind of got screwed out in Brazil. So good for him to get that win. It's definitely an important one. Moving on, Khalil Roundtree against Eric Anders. Khalil Roundtree spent some time in Thailand, kind of sequestered himself from the rest of the world. I tried to interview Khalil before the fight. Wasn't able to make it happen. A lot of it is because he was in, when these guys go to Thailand, because I've tried to interview guys before and you always get that answer back like, oh, well, they're in Thailand. Which I guess Thailand's another planet where they don't have Wi-Fi and they can't communicate with the outside world because that's the kind of responses we're getting. But anyways, he was in Thailand. He had gotten knocked out from an elbow in the clinch and decided, we're going to go to Thailand and we're going to fix that. And he looked great against Anders. Obviously, when you finish with 30-26s across the board and people screaming for Eric's coaches to, I guess, throw in the towel, that's how you know right there. That's how you know he looked great. And, the levels to this game. But, this fight, along with the main event, those are two fights that kind of remind you about those weight classes. Kelvin Gastelum moved up, Dustin Poirier moved up, and they both look great. But, Eric Anders, you could tell he's a middleweight. At 6'1", he's a big guy, but, aside from, I guess, feeling better from the weight cut, at this point, we kind of see that his best option is to go back down to middleweight. And, get back on track. Obviously, if you look at his record, he had a win over Marcus Perez. Takes a split decision loss to Lyoto Machida. And, it's the first career loss, so you kind of see how guys take that loss and then move on. He had the fight against Tim Williams, a little bit lackluster, and then wonk. He had that third-round knockout, pretty much the last couple of seconds, knocks out Tim Williams. And people are kind of like, okay, we're back on the Eric train, and we're excited to see where he goes. And now he takes 3 losses in a row. So it's important for him to heal up properly, take that time off, figure out what he wants to do. He joined a new camp. He was out in Colorado, same camp where Anthony Smith trains. So anytime you switch camps, you're going to have to do some adjusting and learn your new coaches, training partners. So I'm not too worried about him. I think hopefully he moves back down to middleweight, takes that time off, gets himself mentally in the right place. Because, taking a tough loss like that, you don't want it to affect that mental. He's still young in this game. So hopefully he takes that time off, trains with his new team, and comes back looking better than ever at middleweight. So, but Khalil Rountree, one of those guys who, he'll go out there and look amazing, and then he'll end up dropping a lackluster fight. So it's important for him at this point to take the momentum from the Eric Anders win and, give him a big fight. I mean, I'm looking at this Nikita Krylov. I'm looking at OSP. I wouldn't be mad if you fought one of them. I mean, it's a small division. You have an exciting guy in Khalil Rountree. He's getting these knockouts. So, and he looked good too. So use that momentum. Get him against a legit guy with a number next to his name and see what he can do. I mean, Khalil's a guy who fans are very excited about. I interviewed him when I was first getting started on my YouTube channel, and right now it's the second most viewed video. So there are fans backing him. So Khalil Rountree, if you can take that momentum from this fight, give him a legit fight, see where he goes at 205, which is a shallow division. You could be in for something exciting. Co-main event. What do you want to say about this one? I mean, damn. You want to talk about Kelvin Gastelum comes out looking good early. Israel Adesanya practically finishes it in that last round. I mean, I think after every fight, everyone says Israel has arrived. But let's be honest. Israel has arrived. I mean, that was the fight. Oh, Derek Brunson can't strike. Oh, Anderson Silva's old. What's the excuse for Kelvin? Kelvin will piece you up, man. Kelvin's got that boxing. He's knocking out Vitor Belfort, beats Jacare, retires Michael Bisping and Tim Kennedy. I mean, this is a guy, he's legit. This guy can strike. This guy can wrestle. He's a damn good fighter. So this win for Israel, this should erase doubt. This should be the fight that finally, finally we can look at Israel and say, okay, we trust him to go out there and beat these legit guys. Because, that's what happens when you have a guy like Israel with a lot of hype, is that people are afraid to trust him. You know what I mean? We don't know. He's still young. Did he get the right opponent? Listen, after a fight like that, showed the heart, the grit. Kelvin Gastelum as well, but I feel like Kelvin Gastelum, we knew that. We knew he had a tough chin. He was a tough guy who could take damage and could strike with the best of them. But Israel, I feel like he's the one who really answered the questions. I feel like now, as he goes on to probably fight Robert Whittaker next, people are going to trust him a little bit more and say, okay, well, we believe the hype. He's up to the best of them. That last round, that was insane. Mark Goddard was the referee for that one, and I'm not going to lie to you. That's a few times Mark has done some things that have made me, I know these English people, they act like Mark Goddard is the GOAT referee. No one's better than Mark. Mark's the greatest referee of all time. Big John, who is that? Herb Dean. He's done a few questionable things these last couple of fights. I felt that this fight against I was watching the fight and I felt like Kelvin was done. When Israel was just piling on the damage and Kelvin kept falling back down, I felt like that was it. For me, he could have stepped in at any moment. And I know when the fight's close like that, you don't want to step in too early and then find out later that Kelvin was going to win the decision. But, it's a reason that the round was a 10-8, and he could have easily stepped in at that last minute. Israel just put in that sixth gear, put everything he had into that closing round, and really just put a stamp on that fight, and we got to see what he was made of. Mark Goddard, I feel like he could have stepped in at any moment. You really had a fighter taking damage, and, Kelvin, man, when Kelvin got up after the fight was stopped, it looked like it took him a little bit to, mentally get back in there. So, I wasn't happy too much with what Mark Goddard was doing, but, at the end of the day, no big deal. Israel still went on to win the decision. Kelvin, he's banged up, but so is Israel, so nothing crazy. But, I feel like he still could have stepped in. Kelvin Gastelum, man, this dude is legit. If for some reason you didn't believe it, when I saw that fight against Tim Kennedy, I was like, wow. I think we all were like, wow. This guy needs to stay at middleweight. Clearly, this guy has a future in this division. It's crazy how good he looked. Goes on to beat Jacare, goes on to, beat some legit dudes. Loses to Chris Weidman, but he dropped Chris Weidman. So, it was, it was interesting to see him face Israel. Kelvin Gastelum, for me, this is a guy who's going to fight for the belt at middleweight. I have no doubt. Because look at it this way. I know we have Jacare, Yoel Romero, but, give Kelvin Gastelum maybe a rematch against Jacare, maybe Yoel Romero next. Or even Chris Weidman. He wins that fight, he's right back up there. And if you want to have him fight Robert Whittaker for a fresh matchup, rematch Israel for the belt, no one's going to say no to that. He's a fun fighter to watch and delivered some great fights. So this isn't a bad loss. It's one of those losses where, it sucks in the immediate aftermath because you could have gotten a belt, but you know what? He's going to be fighting for the belt anyways down the line. So great stuff from Kelvin. Obviously, he had a good game plan. He was ready for Israel. He had done his homework, and obviously he's with a really legit team. So, it was a great fight. It's the kind of fight where you don't even check Twitter. You're watching the fight and you're just amazed by what these two guys are out there giving you, and it was such a great fight. I have trouble even talking about it. I enjoyed it so much. It just you never know, and these two dudes brought it. So hats off to them, and hopefully they're gonna get paid more in the future. Because if they keep delivering fights like that, there's no excuse to be paid so low for professional athletes. Let's talk about your main event. Great fight. Like I said, I didn't even check Twitter during this fight. I just left the fight going and watched it. I enjoyed it a lot. Max Holloway, I expected him to look better at 155, because we saw Dustin Poirier look better at 155. We saw Kelvin look better with a move up. But like Eric Anders, it was kind of obvious that this wasn't his weight class, Max came out there with the same game plan he always has, which is to use his size, his length, and his volume. It didn't work. Dustin Poirier hits hard. And I don't want to say he's a durable guy because he's shown in the past that not always, but I feel like at 155 he's much more durable than he was at 145. So he can, if you're not hitting him with those haymakers, he can just eat those shots and continue coming. And what I saw out there was that Max Holloway was doing what he normally does at 145, and it didn't work. He fought a guy who was bigger, stronger, could take those shots, and who can crack. 145, man, the lower you go into these weight classes, the less these guys can crack, and Dustin Poirier can crack, and Max Holloway's got a damn chin on him. It was a great fight. I don't know about that 49-46, and then Khabib out here on Twitter talking about, it was a draw. Listen, man, I don't know what you're talking about. That wasn't a draw. I would have been fine with a 48-47. Obviously, the right guy won, so I guess you can't complain too much. But, Max Holloway gave a great fight, but it does, for me, if he wants to move to 155, you can't half-ass it. Like, if you want to move to 155, you got to put on that muscle. Put on that strength, put on that size to really, hang with these guys. Because from what we saw here, it's not enough to just cut a little bit less weight. So you're going to have to go up there and try to look the part, man. Try to, put on some size. And it's obvious that, he's got some changes to make if he wants to move up to 155. That being said, he didn't get blown out of the water, but it was obvious that, Max didn't look as good as he normally does at 145. So, has some things needs to tweak here and there, but right now at 45, I don't see who beats him though. So Max for me still a great champion at featherweight. It's just if he wants to move up to lightweight, he's gonna have to make some changes. Maybe a little bit in his style, maybe put on some muscle, add some strength, because it's just 10 pounds, but it's a significant difference. You saw even Poirier made Max look small, and Max is 5'11". Max is really tall, so it was it was interesting to see that for sure. I was surprised that he was able to make Max look small, and I look forward to seeing Max in this next fight, though. I think he's going to redeem himself and show everybody that he is one of the more legit guys in the pound for pound rankings. Last thing I want to talk about UFC 236 wise, John Bones Jones. I don't know if you guys saw this, but he's on Twitter calling out Israel, and the fight kind of gained some steam. People are doing polls on Twitter to try to figure out if people are interested in the fight or not. And obviously, people are going to be interested. You could watch Jones go out there and fight a cow, and people would be interested in that fight. So obviously, there's interest in that fight. I don't mind that this talk is coming out because, when you come into the UFC, you're the same height as John Jones and you sort of have this air of invincibility. People are going to talk about, you. Eventually it's going to be compared to John Jones, and eventually it's going to turn into what happens if you fight John Jones. So that's going to happen. John Jones is... it looks like it's brought out that competitive fire. We know how John Jones is. He's taking these fights at light heavyweight, knocking him down, and now he sees, a guy who took out Anderson Silva, and he's friends with Anderson Silva. John Jones is, so something to keep in mind. He sees him take out Anderson Silva, and he's like, oh, eventually John Jones is next. So John's like, whoa, what are you talking about? So we have, I don't want to say beef. I feel like we're quick to throw out beef. It's not really beef, but there's a certain... You bring in two alpha males, two competitive guys like that, they start jawing at each other. Eventually, the talk of them fighting each other is gonna, it's gonna materialize. So you've got John Jones talking about potentially fighting Israel Adesanya, and it's an interesting fight. But I think until Israel has a few more fights now, and weighing in at 183, a lot of people talk about it, but that's not a lot, man. You're in a title fight. You have to make 185. He comes in 2 pounds under. This is not a very big guy. Even his frame, he's pretty thin. Especially if you compare him to Kelvin Gastelum, obviously, but he's thin. So you want to see a fight where you put technique versus technique. You know what I mean? Where two guys go out there and it's an even fight. You don't want to see like John Jones come out there, fight a guy he's 30, 40 pounds heavier than, and beat him based on his physical advantage. If we want to see them, it's because they present a set of skills that are interesting and match up, once again, interestingly against each other. So I understand why this fight is sort of circulating. John Jones is tweeting, fans are jumping on it, getting excited for it, so I understand that, but I think Israel Adesanya is correct when he's going out there and saying, this isn't about John, it's about me. Listen, you have to understand that as members of the media, we have to bring traffic to the website. Some people call it clicks. You have to bring interest to your website. You have to get clicks and all that stuff. Whether we like it or not, it's maybe shitty to talk about, but we have to talk about it. And so we have to ask those kind of questions. John Jones out there talking about, oh, where's Israel? So we have to ask Israel. We have to ask him about it. We have to ask him about the fact that John Jones calling him out. Is that a fight you want? Israel's a guy, eyes on the prize. He got the first belt. Now Robert Whittaker is a huge fight. It's not a bigger fight than John Jones, but right now it's the fight that makes the most sense. It's the biggest fight, and good on him for not feeding into that John Jones stuff. Reminding people, it's about me, and that he's fighting Robert Whittaker next. I feel like this John Jones stuff, it's a little premature. Israel, for me, once he wins that middleweight belt, and I say that, of course, if he wins the middleweight belt, gets a few title defenses, and reaches that point where John Jones is at. Where John Jones, you think, like, who are we going to throw out there that's going to beat John Jones? Nobody can think of anybody. If Israel Adesanya can reach that point, and then we pit them against each other, now you're talking. Now this is a damn fight. No trash talk needed. This is a technique versus technique, potential GOAT versus potential GOAT. So that's where it gets interesting. But right now, obviously the fight happens, I'm going to tune in. Not just because it's my job, but I'm going to tune in. It's a fun fight, but it's not interesting yet. It's interesting in terms of we compared John and Israel, but there's no, I talked to Israel about it first time I interviewed him about those comparisons. It's like, does it bother you? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, is there anything you see in John Jones's game that you sort of, that you like and stuff? And he mentions that he looks at a lot of John Jones's wrestling and tries to add that to his game because, they have a similar frame. So, I feel like right now Israel's young. I believe he's 29. He's climbing. He's still undefeated. Let him take care of business at middleweight, and then we can talk about 205. Listen, man. How long have we waited for 205 to become fun again? Forever. So we have plenty of time. John Jones isn't going anywhere, hopefully. He's just going to keep beating guys. And then eventually, if Israel holds up his end of the bargain, then we can start talking about the fight. But right now, it's not an interesting fight. It would be premature. And it wouldn't do anything for either man. So, I feel like this super fight, I have no interest in it. Let Israel do his thing. Let John Jones do his thing. We want John Jones at heavyweight, right? So, don't entertain this fight, Both men have shit they need to take care of. And right now, this isn't an interesting fight, really. Moving on from that subject, lots of good stuff. We had such a week full of news. UFC 236 aside, obviously some great fights, some great performances. A few guys who, come on, they could have done better, but whatever. I just want to look it up here. I did a post on Twitter. Follow me, Grandsire MMA, and kind of recapping some of the news. And we had a lot. Okay, so here it is. Conor McGregor claims that he broke his foot before the Khabib fight. Why not? I was watching a video of his footwork and people were mentioning that he could kind of look flat-footed and everything. So I think it's a legit claim. But I also think that Conor's trying to get that rematch. So, I think it's being taken with the right level of interest where it's like, oh man, was his foot broken? That sucks. And that's it. And, no talk of a rematch. Conor McGregor, once again, assaulted a man in a bar. So I believe this was in Dublin, Ireland, if I'm not mistaken. I guess the guy was being a dick, and Conor took care of business. If this was anybody else, I think this would have been a big news. But because it's Conor, and that's what Conor does, we look at it like, yep, at least not smashing cell phones, right? Next, TJ Dillashaw tested positive for EPO and is banned 2 years. That was a shock. At first I didn't realize what EPO was off the top of my head. look it up and you find out it's we're manipulating the red blood cells to gain more oxygen, which improves your cardio. And TJ went out and posted stuff on his Instagram, and basically it's like he cheated. He's guilty. He's banned for 2 years, and that's it. And I kind of feel like we don't have any closure in this story, and I feel like that's what bothers me the most, is that you're kind of sitting there like, what? Like, a champion went out there and cheated, and that's it. It's kind of like we have this big bomb dropped on us, and all of a sudden, all right, there you go. TJ's lucky, first of all, only to be suspended 2 years. When you cheat on purpose, which is what this was. I mean, you cheat. You can face 4 years. So he should consider himself lucky. He's only suspended for 2 years. That legacy is tainted forever. I mean, he was in talks to be the greatest bantamweight of all time. His only sort of thing on his record that wasn't good was a split to Dominic Cruz. And that was something that was going to be fixed. So yeah, it's devastating. It's and it's a bad look for the sport too, because people are, if you type in EPO on Google, all you have is UFC fighter TJ Dillashaw, UFC fighter, UFC bantamweight champion, UFC champion. So it sucks, but you know what? The news is already starting to fade away. It's already starting to slowly, people are going to move on, and then we're going to forget about it. And before you know it, it'll be, 2021, and TJ's going to fight some contender at bantamweight, and people are going to feel conflicted. And I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised to see TJ retire early. Honestly, I think this is such a blow to his legacy, and it's going to negatively affect a lot of stuff in his career. But we'll see what he does with his time off, and we'll see what's next for him. John Jones choked out a willing fan in Germany. First of all, if you've seen the video, there's a good chance. If you saw it on Twitter, there's a good chance you saw it from my Twitter. I noticed that it flew under the radar, so I thought, what? Let me get the goods. Let me get the good parts of the video. Let me post it on Instagram. It's kind of like hey guys, check it out. Look what John Jones has been up to. And it blew up. It went viral in England. Sport Bible, The Sun, Daily Telegraph. I don't even know. Yeah, my tweet was featured in there. I had reporters in my DM, from like New York Post and shit. They were like, oh, is this your video? Can we use it? Which kind of pissed me off a little bit, because if you check my bio, it clearly says I'm an MMA journalist. So, the video is kind of like, hey guys, look what John Jones is up to. And not, hey guys, look what I filmed. So it pissed me off a little bit. And, but I told all of them, like, no, it's not my video. And I kind of left it at that. I was like, look, I'm not trying to be a dick, but it's not my video, so whatever. And John Jones, man, did everything right. Tells the guy to keep his arms out, chokes him out. Because, obviously the fan asked, right? And John Jones didn't just, hey, you want to get choked? So he chokes out the fan. As soon as the guy falls asleep, John Jones on top of it. And then he lets him go, and the guy hits the back of his head. Boom, boom. Does a little bit of a double, hits the ground, boom, boom. And I'm just like, damn. Like John Jones did everything right. Guy goes out, lifts the legs up, helps him get back up, and he lets him hit the head on the ground. That's just John Jones, man. He did a nice thing, and there's still something. Obviously it was great for the fan. I guess it's a great story, right? I got choked out by John Jones, so that was cool. Cool of John to do it as well. And I hope people saw it like that. I hope people didn't see it like, oh, look at John Jones choking a guy out. Like, no, he was doing a nice thing. I've seen plenty of fighters do it. Tito Ortiz. Watched the video of him choking out a radio host. Guy just goes completely to sleep. It's a scary thing, man. Those rear naked chokes, I feel like some of them, the way guys fall asleep is like even worse than these knockouts. But a pretty cool moment from John Jones while he was out in Germany. So, and good stuff there. Paulo Costa. This guy, man, I feel like we all hate him. Well, I say we all hate him. I feel like the fans hate him. But there's no good reason, but like people are looking for that reason. He gets in trouble for, I guess, stomach medication. Had to pull out of his fight. Gets fined for it. Yeah, what do you want to say about that? I mean, everybody, as soon as it comes to Paulo Costa, steroids. It's not necessarily steroids. Well, it's not steroids, otherwise he would have been caught, right? Yeah, he was talking shit about Israel as well for his fight. I get that the two of them kind of have beef, but you beat Uriah Hall and Johnny Hendricks, so take it easy, okay? There's no reason to be an asshole, man. But yeah, it's just a silly situation. Luke Rockhold set to make his debut at 205. It's gonna be at UFC 239 against Jan Blachowicz. Good shit, man. Luke Rockhold at 205. I feel like they've been talking about it forever, and it's just finally now happening. So, good stuff. Should be a great fight. We should be able to figure out where Luke Rockhold is in the division. So, it should be some good stuff. I'm looking forward to it. And he's a big guy, man. 6'3", just a behemoth. So, I'm looking forward to it. It should be interesting. Oh, yeah, Ryan Bader signs a new Bellator deal. Good stuff. We're happy to see him sign a Bellator deal. Because that's the thing is that Bellator can sign free agents, but then you have to keep those free agents. If he signs for the UFC right after, or worse, goes to PFL, then you just lost a double champ, just lost a big name, just lost a legit guy. So signed an exclusive deal with Bellator. I mentioned exclusive because that probably means we won't see him in Ryzen. I mean, that's fine. I don't know who's clamoring to see Bellator and Ryzen, or Bader and Ryzen, but it is what it is. It's obviously a big deal for Bellator because he's a legit 205er, and the UFC could use him again. So, fair play to them for signing him. BJ Penn accused of domestic violence as well as heavy drug use. I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's crazy. He's got his ex-wife claiming that, he's doing cocaine, trying to get her to smoke pot. I mean, obviously it's not good to peer pressure, but, out of all the things she's accusing him of, probably not the biggest deal. But, yeah, there's one where she explained that he got cocaine on his oldest daughter and he wanted to kill himself. I mean, crazy stuff, crazy, domestic violence. It's no joke. It's a serious matter, and, it sucks to see that, especially because it's a guy like him that's so beloved. And when you hear stuff like that, you're like, man, our training camps are just so he can stay sober. You're like, holy shit, that's awful. Awful situation. Yeah, I mean, that's news. I don't even know what to say. It's just such a, it's an awful situation. You can't have different opinions about it. I mean, it's a shitty thing. It's alleged, so it's not like there are no charges against him or anything. It's basically what she claims. But it's a big deal. I've seen a lot of people joke about, will BJPenn.com, are they going to report this news? And, people are just being assholes and joking around. But what they don't realize is that's, it's actually a good question. You claim to be a big media outlet. You claim to not be biased and that you're legit and all that stuff. Do you report this news? It's news. It was an interesting question because, obviously BJ Penn is not going to be happy if you post it, but you consider yourself a news site, right? So, obviously they didn't report it. I mean, that's I wouldn't even know what to tell you in that kind of situation. It's delicate, but it does bring a question of, okay, well, do you consider yourself a legit outlet? Are you a legit news source? I mean, it's a difficult thing. Last one before we eventually wrap up here. Ali Abdelaziz. If he's not in the news for one reason, it's something else. So he goes on Twitter and he claims that he knows at least 5 guys that are using EPO. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna. I'm not like, oh my God, what? How dare you? There are probably guys using EPO, especially after finding out that USADA doesn't always test for it. And apparently there are people that have ways of passing these tests and cheating correctly. So that's a crazy thing, man. EPO, holy crap. The issue is that he's a well-known manager. Has a lot of haters, has a lot of eyes on him. He goes out there and he's like, oh, I know 5 guys. Plenty of people can name a bunch of his clients that have extraordinary cardio. And people are always going to be like, oh, 5 of them, are they clients of yours? So, not a very smart accusation to make. And then, USADA's like, well, hit us up. Here's our phone number. Khali, call us up. Nice try, USADA. I mean, come on. Come on, USADA. That wasn't gonna work. But it's one of those accusations meant to stir stuff up. But listen, man, you can't go out there and claim, guys, cheating, and then just kind of leave it like that. Like, oh, I know people cheating. All right, there you go. Do whatever you want with that. So it's I don't know. I don't like it, but I wouldn't expect anything less. But it's a serious accusation, though. If he really does know 5 guys off the top of his head that are using EPO, that's pretty shitty. I'm not too surprised, but I mean, come on. It's obviously a big deal. All right, well, that's it. That's a lot. It's a lot. So here's what I want to do. I want to just wrap up. Thank you guys for listening. I mean, if you've listened up until this point, wow. I really appreciate it. Listen, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Grandsire MMA. I don't really have an Instagram, like a Lucas Grandsire Instagram, for MMA. But I do run MMA World Show on Instagram. So if you do want to follow that, you definitely can. I am not going to stand in your way. So you can find that on Instagram. So this is going to be posted on YouTube as well as SoundCloud. So I don't know if you're listening on YouTube, if you're listening on SoundCloud, wherever. I'm going to try to post it in different areas so it's accessible. So definitely, if you've listened up until this point and you have some notes, maybe there are things you didn't like. You don't like the way I speak. Maybe I was too monotone. It's not always something that you can hear. Maybe there are things you didn't like. Hit me up on Twitter. Let me know. DM me. Don't, call me out in front of everyone. But, send me a DM. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you didn't like. Maybe you think I sound like a douchebag. Let me know as well. That's what's going to help me improve. So, this is episode 1. So there's a lot of work to do. A lot of improvements to make. And, we're just going to focus on getting better with each episode. So if you guys want to hit me up, let me know what you like. Let me know what you didn't like. That's great. Just end it with this. Thanks so much for listening. And, and by the way, what I want to do is if you guys have questions, about the industry, about MMA, whatever, hit me up on Twitter. Send me your question. I'll answer them on the show. I won't imagine I'll get like millions of questions. So I'll definitely answer whatever comes my way. So, you find me on Twitter and, send in your questions. So, we're going to wrap it up with this. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you tune in for the next episode. I'll look to improve with every episode. So, all right. Thank you guys so much.